Your utility company knows something you don't. Beneath every piece of property you own, there is a power source that has been working around the clock for thousands of years. It doesn't require panels, it doesn't require batteries, and it certainly doesn't require permission from anyone. But here's what nobody tells you. The real secret isn't the electricity itself. It's understanding why the soil beneath your feet has been generating measurable electrical potential since long before Thomas Edison ever drew up his first wiring schematic. Today, we're going to explore the angle that changes everything about how you think of energy independence on a fixed income, and it has nothing to do with building more devices. It has everything to do with understanding what your land is already trying to tell you. If you're on a fixed income and you've spent the last few years watching your electric bill climb steadily upward, you've probably felt that sinking sensation in your stomach when the summer months roll around. The air conditioning runs harder, the power bill swells, and there's this nagging feeling that you're somehow paying for something that should be abundant and free. Utilities have engineered the entire narrative around energy to make you believe three things. First, that electricity must come from centralized sources controlled by them. Second, that alternatives are expensive, complex, and unreliable. And third, that you should feel grateful they're willing to serve you at all. But there's a fourth narrative that gets completely ignored. It's the narrative about what the Earth itself is already doing, and why most people over 60 have accidentally walked past the solution their entire lives without ever recognizing it. The Earth battery concept that's been circulating online is true. A piece of copper and a piece of zinc buried in moist soil will generate voltage. The science is real. The results are measurable. But what's happening in those underground interactions is far more sophisticated than most DIY videos suggest. When you bury those metals, you're not just creating a chemical reaction. You're tapping into a living, breathing ecosystem that's been managing energy exchange for millions of years. Soil isn't dead. It's not inert. It's one of the most biologically active substances on the planet. A single gram of healthy soil contains more microorganisms than there are people on Earth. Bacteria, fungi, protozoa, all of them are constantly exchanging electrons, generating bioelectrochemical processes that have shaped the planet's entire energy landscape. And here's the part that makes energy companies very uncomfortable. You can't patent it. You can't meter it. You can't prevent a customer from accessing it once they understand what's really happening beneath their feet. For the last 150 years, we've been told that energy is something that flows down power lines from distant locations controlled by massive corporations. We've internalized this so deeply that most people over 60 can't even imagine energy working any other way. You grew up in an era where the electrical grid was genuinely remarkable. It connected homes that had previously relied on kerosene and candles. You saw it as progress. And it was. But somewhere along the line, progress stopped being about giving people access to abundant energy and started being about controlling how people accessed energy and how much they'd pay for that access. The narrative shifted. Now, energy independence is presented as a luxury good for wealthy people with new homes and perfect roofs for solar panels. It's marketed as aspirational, complicated, and out of reach for anyone living on a pension or social security check. The Earth battery becomes just another DIY project that shows up in a YouTube algorithm, gets some views, and then the video creator moves on to the next trend. But what if the approach was completely backwards? What if the real power, and I mean this literally, comes from understanding that your property is already a power plant? You just haven't been trained to recognize it. Think about this logically. You own the land. The laws that govern soil and the microbiological processes happening within it existed long before your property was subdivided and deeded to you. The electrochemical potential in soil isn't something someone installed. It's something that exists naturally, constantly, everywhere that conditions are right. When you stop thinking of an Earth battery as an exotic experiment and start thinking of it as documentation of what's already happening, the entire conversation changes. You're not trying to create something new. You're not trying to harness some cutting-edge technology. You're simply recognizing and organizing what's already there. This is the real threat to the utility industry. Not because Earth batteries are powerful enough to run your entire house. They're not. At least not with current technology. But because once you understand that electricity generation isn't mysterious, once you see that it's a natural process that happens in soil, in plants, in the ocean, and in the atmosphere itself, you stop accepting the narrative that you need their permission to be energy independent. Let's talk about why this matters for your situation specifically. You're not 25 years old. You're not planning to recoup a $2 5,000 solar investment over 30 years. You need solutions now. You need to reduce your power bill this month, not 2 decades from now. And you need systems that won't leave you helpless if technology fails or supply chains break down. Here's what most Earth battery videos skip entirely. The real value isn't the electricity generated from a single cell or even from multiple cells wired in series. The real value is understanding that you have a renewable energy source beneath your feet that requires no maintenance, no replacement, no service contract, and no federal incentive paperwork. It exists, it works, and it will keep working long after you're gone and long after the utility companies have moved on to squeezing the next generation of consumers. The other piece of this puzzle that deserves attention is why you haven't heard about earth batteries before. It's not because they don't work. It's because in 1888, a man named Thomas Edison realized that direct current technology generated from these kinds of cells would never create the kind of long-distance power distribution network that would allow a single company to control an entire region's energy supply. Alternating current, developed by George Westinghouse and Nikola Tesla, became the standard instead, not because it was technically superior for every application, but because it allowed for centralization. It allowed for monopolies. It allowed for the utility company model that still dominates today. Earth batteries generate direct current. They work best locally. They can't be transmitted efficiently over long distances. From a centralized power company's perspective, that makes them useless. From your perspective, sitting in your home and paying monthly bills, that makes them perfect. You don't need long-distance transmission. You need local, reliable power generation right where you live. Now, here's where this gets practical. A single earth battery, just one copper and zinc electrode pair buried in moist soil, will generate somewhere between 0.5 and 1 volt at around 2 to 3 milliamps. That doesn't sound like much, and in isolation, it isn't. But if you have land, if you have soil, if you understand how to configure multiple cells in series and parallel arrangements, the potential becomes interesting. More importantly, the educational value becomes enormous. Once you've buried your first earth battery and watched a small LED light up from nothing but copper, zinc, and moist earth, you've proven to yourself that energy generation isn't a mystery. It's not something that requires a corporation to manage it for you. It's physics, it's chemistry, it's accessible, and at $8 for the materials, it's affordable even on a tight retirement budget. What concerns utility companies isn't that earth batteries will power your entire home. They're not worried about that. What concerns them is precedent. It's the moment when you, someone on a fixed income, prove to yourself that energy independence is possible. It's the moment when you share that knowledge with neighbors or family members. It's the moment when the narrative breaks, when people realize that electricity isn't magic, that it's not proprietary technology that only universities and corporations understand, and that the current system exists not because it's the only option, but because it's the most profitable option for those controlling it. That's dangerous to them. That's a threat to the entire business model. So earth batteries remain in the margins. They show up in YouTube videos. They're treated as novelties. They're never presented as what they actually are, a documentation of a fundamental truth about how energy works on this planet. The deeper question underneath all of this, and the question that should keep you thinking long after this video ends, is what other aspects of energy independence have we been trained to ignore? If earth batteries have been scientifically verified for 2 centuries, but remain invisible in mainstream energy discussions, what else might be hidden in plain sight? What other systems for generating, storing, and managing electricity have been sidelined not because they don't work, but because they don't fit the centralized profit model? You've lived 60, 70, 80 years. You've watched technology advance. You've seen fortunes made and lost. You've developed a good bullshit detector. Trust that instinct now. When you look at your utility bill and it doesn't make sense, when you see it climbing year after year while your income stays the same, that's not an accident. That's a business model working exactly as designed. And once you understand that the alternative sources of energy exist, that they're accessible, and that they've been documented and proven for generations, you can make a different choice. This is where most content on this topic fails. It presents earth batteries as a curiosity, a fun science experiment, something to impress your grandchildren with. But that framing misses the entire point. Earth batteries aren't interesting because they're weird. They're interesting because they're proof. They're documentation that energy independence isn't a future technology. It's not something we're waiting for breakthroughs to achieve. It's something that exists right now, beneath your feet, waiting for you to recognize it and use it. The technology behind it isn't new. The science isn't complicated. The barrier to entry isn't technical. It's psychological. It's the barrier of believing the narrative you've been sold, that energy is something controlled by distant corporations, that alternatives are experimental, and that you should feel lucky to pay whatever they ask. Once you cross that barrier, once you bury your first earth battery and see it work, you've broken through that psychological ceiling, and what comes next is a much clearer view of what's actually possible. In the next part of this exploration, we're going to get into the specific mechanics of how to configure earth batteries for maximum output, how to wire multiple cells together, and most importantly, how to integrate them into a practical system that works alongside other energy sources. But first, you need to understand this foundational piece. The earth battery isn't magical. It's not perpetual motion. It's not generating energy from nothing. What it is a simple mechanism for organizing and capturing electrical potential that already exists. It's a documentation of what your soil is already doing. And once you see that clearly, once you stop being confused by corporate engineered complexity, everything else becomes much simpler. Now that you understand the basic principle, let's talk about something most people get wrong right from the start. When you look at soil, you're not just looking at dirt. You're looking at a living system. Billions of microorganisms, minerals, moisture, and chemical potential all working together. That's what makes this so different from a traditional battery you'd buy at a hardware store. A commercial battery is sealed, manufactured to precise specifications, and designed to fail within a predictable time frame, so you buy another one. Soil, by contrast, is self-renewing. It improves with time. It gets more conductive as organic matter breaks down. It's the exact opposite of planned obsolescence. So here's what happens beneath the surface. When you place two different metals in moist soil, you're creating what's called a galvanic couple. The zinc wants to lose electrons, the copper wants to gain them. Moisture acts as the bridge. But, and this is crucial, the quality of your soil directly determines how much current you can pull. Sandy soil, poor conductivity. Clay-rich soil, better. Soil that's been amended with compost, with organic matter, with decomposing vegetation, that's your sweet spot. Why? Because all that organic material contains dissolved minerals and salts. It's basically nature's electrolyte factory. The second mistake people make is thinking that one earth battery cell can power anything useful. A single copper-zinc pair in average soil produces roughly 0.5 to 1 volt. That's barely enough to light an LED. It won't charge your phone. It won't run a fan. But here's where the system thinking comes in. If one cell produces half a volt, and you wire 10 of them in series, you're looking at 5 volts. 20 cells, 10 volts. 50 cells, 50 volts. Suddenly you have enough potential to run real equipment. Suddenly you're not just demonstrating a physics principle, you're building an actual power source. But let's be practical here. You're not going to dig up half your yard to plant 50 earth batteries. That's not the point. The point is understanding that you can scale this to whatever your situation allows. Maybe you have a small section of garden that gets good moisture retention. Maybe you're willing to maintain a dedicated bed. Maybe you're testing this with just 5 or 6 cells first. All of those approaches are valid. The physics doesn't care about your scale. It works the same way at 10 cells as it does at 100. Now, here's what separates someone who just understands earth batteries from someone who actually uses them. Wiring configuration. And this is where your age and experience actually become an advantage. You've probably worked with basic electrical systems before. You've seen a series circuit and a parallel circuit. You know that series adds voltage while parallel adds current. With earth batteries, that knowledge translates directly. If you need more voltage to run a piece of equipment, you wire your cells in series. If you need more current, more amperage, to power something that draws a lot of juice, you wire them in parallel. Most practical applications will use a combination of both, which is called a series parallel configuration. Let's say you want to build a system with 30 cells to power a small LED array, a charging circuit for AA batteries, and maybe a low-power fan for hot summer nights. You might arrange those 30 cells into 5 strings of 6 cells each. Each string wired in series gives you about 3 volts. Then you wire those 5 strings in parallel, which maintains that 3-volt output but dramatically increases your amperage capacity. Suddenly you can run multiple devices from a single system. Suddenly it's not a novelty, it's an actual power infrastructure for your home. But here's the reality that nobody likes to discuss. Moisture management is everything. Your earth batteries will only produce current when the soil around them is moist. In a desert climate or during a dry season, your output drops. Maybe not to zero, soil retains some moisture deeper down, but significantly. This is actually why location matters more than most people realize. If you live in Florida or the Pacific Northwest, where the humidity is naturally high and rainfall is regular, earth batteries are almost effortless. You plant them, forget about them for weeks, and they deliver consistent current year-round. But if you're in the Southwest or you experience long, dry summers, you need a contingency plan. Some people build their earth batteries in raised garden beds, where they can easily add water. Others use drip irrigation systems on timers. Some even run gray water from the house, the water from your shower or washing machine, through the battery bed, which does double duty. It feeds your plants or keeps your grass alive while keeping your batteries at optimal moisture levels. This turns your earth battery system into part of a larger water management ecosystem. The third consideration that changes everything is soil chemistry. Remember earlier when we talked about how organic matter improves conductivity? That's half the story. The mineral content of your soil matters too. If your soil is naturally alkaline or acidic, your output changes. If it has high salinity, which is actually common in older homes where road salt has been tracked in over decades, that conductivity increases. Some people in areas with poor soil naturally get frustrated with their earth batteries. But here's what they miss. You can amend the soil. You can add sulfur to increase acidity. You can add lime to increase alkalinity. You can work with compost, aged manure, or even biochar to increase conductivity and improve bacterial activity. In fact, some of the best results come from people who treat their earth battery bed like a gardening project rather than an electrical installation. You plant the batteries, yes, but you also plant nitrogen-fixing plants around them. Clover, for instance. Legumes that add nitrogen back to the soil. As those plants grow and decompose, they improve conductivity. You create a living system that gets better with each season. By year 2, your output per cell might increase by 30 to 40% simply because the soil is becoming more biologically active. And this brings us to the reality that separates earth batteries from expensive solar setups. Maintenance. A solar panel needs to be kept clean. Dust and pollen reduce output. Bird droppings reduce output. You're out there every few weeks with a cloth or a hose, keeping those panels producing. Lithium batteries need temperature monitoring. They need to be kept away from extreme heat and cold. They have electronics that can fail. Earth batteries, you check the moisture level occasionally. In wet climates, you barely check anything. The system self-maintains. In dry climates, you establish a watering schedule and move on. That's genuinely the extent of it. No electronics to fail, no lithium cells to degrade, no planned obsolescence. Now, let's address the elephant in the room. How much current can you realistically expect? We talked about 0.5 to 1 volt per cell, but what about amperage? A single cell in good soil produces roughly 50 to 200 milliamps, depending on electrode surface area and soil conductivity. In the grand scheme of power generation, that's tiny. A single cell can't charge your phone quickly. It can't run a laptop. But 30 cells, 50 cells, you're looking at 5 to 10 amps of continuous current. That's enough to power a small DC fan, charge multiple AA or AAA batteries, power a string of LED lighting, run a water pump for a small garden. It won't replace your grid connection, but it's not meant to. It's supplemental. It's constant, and it costs nothing to generate. Here's where it gets interesting for someone on a fixed income. That supplemental power adds up. If you have an earth battery system producing an average of 8 amps at 5 volts, roughly 40 watts continuously, that's 960 watts per day. Run that for a month, and you're producing roughly 29 kilowatt hours of completely free electricity. In many parts of America, that's $15 to $20 off your monthly electric bill. Doesn't sound like much in isolation, but multiply that over a year, and you're looking at $180 to $240 in electricity costs avoided. That's grocery money. That's a cable TV subscription that you no longer need to pay for. That's money that stays in your pocket instead of flowing to a utility company. The really clever part, the part that makes this work as a long-term strategy, is integration with other systems you might already have or be planning. If you have even a modest solar setup, just a 100-watt panel to keep a battery bank topped up, your earth batteries become the night shift. When the sun is down, the solar batteries are depleted from running evening loads, but your earth batteries are still working. They might not produce much, but that amperage runs a small fan or charges batteries for the next day. Similarly, if you have a hand crank generator or a small wind turbine, earth batteries become your baseline consistent power, allowing those intermittent sources to be less critical. And here's the psychological piece that matters. Having even a small amount of power generation that requires nothing from you, no sun, no wind, no physical effort, is genuinely comforting. During storm season, when the grid goes down and the lines are down for days, your earth batteries are still working. They're not going to run your whole house, but they'll charge batteries. They'll power lights. They'll run a small fan or a water pump. They're the power source that never lets you down because it's not dependent on weather or infrastructure. By this point, you're probably wondering about scale and cost. We mentioned that a single earth battery costs roughly $8 to build. That's 1 copper electrode, 1 zinc electrode, and the cost of a small amount of wire and connectors. A system of 30 cells, enough to be genuinely useful, costs around $240 in materials. No installation cost. No electrician fee, just your time and maybe a weekend afternoon. Compare that to even the smallest solar system. A single 100-watt panel runs $300 to $400 before installation, and suddenly earth batteries stop being a curiosity and become a legitimate component of an energy strategy. The beauty of starting small is that you can test the concept in your specific location before committing heavily. Plant 5 or 6 cells, monitor them for a month, see what your output actually is in your climate, with your soil, learn the maintenance routine. Then, once you're confident, expand. Add another group of cells, wire them together, expand again. You're not making a huge upfront investment, you're learning a system and building it incrementally as you prove it works for you. This is genuine energy independence. Not the kind that costs 30 grand and ties you to a company's service schedule. Real independence, built 1 cell at a time, with materials that outlast you. Once your initial test group is running steady, the next question becomes, what do you actually power with this current? A single cell produces about half a volt. Not much on its own, but here's where the math becomes interesting. If you have 10 cells wired in series, which means connecting them end to end, you're looking at roughly 5 volts. That's enough to trickle charge a small battery bank. 20 cells gets you closer to 10 volts. 30 cells and you're approaching the voltage needed to charge a standard car battery or power small LED lighting throughout your home. The real power, and I mean this literally, comes from wiring them in parallel for amperage. This means connecting all the positive terminals together and all the negative terminals together. When you do this, the voltage stays the same, but the current flow increases. A single cell might give you 50 milliamps, 10 cells in parallel give you 500 milliamps. That's enough to power a small water fountain pump, run a radio, or keep emergency LED lights charged all night long. Now here's something that separates Earth batteries from every other energy device on the market. They improve with age. As your cells sit in the soil month after month, the electrochemical environment actually stabilizes. The soil biology adjusts. The mineral distribution reaches equilibrium. Cells that produce half a volt in their first week often settle into producing closer to 0.6 of a volt by month 3. That's a 12% improvement just from letting time do the work. Compare that to a solar panel, which loses output every single year due to weathering and degradation. Your neighbors might never notice what you've done. That's another advantage. These aren't panels on a roof announcing to the world that you've gone independent. They're buried beneath your garden. They're disguised as part of your landscape. If you decide to grow tomatoes or herbs above your array, no one knows. Your cells are working 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, completely hidden and completely silent. There's no mechanism to break down. There's no moving part to wear out. It's just physics doing what physics has done since the Earth was formed. And here's what makes this genuinely different from other off-grid solutions. When the power grid goes down, and statistics show it's going to happen more often, not less, your Earth batteries don't care. They're not relying on stored energy in a lithium cell that you've been cycling for years. They're not waiting for the sun to come back out. They're generating current right now, in the dark, in the rain, in the middle of a winter night. That current is small, yes, but small is enough when you're living smart. Many people ask whether Earth batteries can power an entire home. The honest answer is no, not yet, not alone. A typical American household uses between 20 and 30 kilowatt hours per day. You'd need thousands of cells to generate that amount of continuous current. And while that's technically possible, it's not practical or cost-effective when you're working with a fixed income. But that's not really the question you should be asking. The question is, what can you actually eliminate from your utility bill right now? If you wire your cells to charge a battery bank that powers your emergency lighting, your backup radio, your phone chargers, and maybe a small fan during summer nights, you've just eliminated the backup generator you were going to buy. If you use the trickle charge to keep a car battery topped off for starting your lawnmower or power tools, you've saved the cost of batteries going dead in the off-season. If you redirect that current to a small pump that circulates water through your garden beds, you're essentially stealing energy from the earth and using it to grow food. That's a net positive on your monthly budget. The psychology of this matters. Most people never act because they're waiting for the perfect solution. They think, I'll go solar when I can afford it all at once. I'll install a backup system when I have $15,000 saved. Meanwhile, years pass. Utility bills keep rising, they keep paying, but someone who plants an Earth battery array this month, expands it next month, and adds practical charging solutions the month after that, that person is moving. That person is building independence at their own pace, with money they can actually afford to spend. The maintenance schedule is almost laughably simple. Every few weeks, especially during dry spells, you want to check the soil moisture around your cells. If it's drying out, water it lightly. You're not trying to create a swamp, just consistent moisture. Once a month, do a quick voltage check with an inexpensive digital multimeter. Write the number down. Over time, you'll see patterns. You'll notice which cells in your array are performing best. You might decide to add more cells of that configuration. You might notice that cells in shadier, naturally damper spots perform better, and you'll adjust accordingly. This is personal data about your own property, and it's incredibly valuable. For storage, you're not locked into expensive lithium. A simple sealed lead-acid battery, the kind that costs $100 to $200, will work perfectly. Or a deep cycle marine battery, or, if you really want to go old school, a bank of simple car batteries that you've set aside. These batteries will last longer, need replacement less often, and when they do finally give up the ghost, you can recycle them for almost nothing. Compare that to lithium cells that degrade and cost thousands to replace. As your confidence builds and your array grows, you might start thinking about combination systems. What if you have a small solar panel, just $300 or $400 worth, that charges during the day while your Earth batteries contribute steady current around the clock? What if you add a hand crank generator or a small wind turbine for a third source? You're not trying to power everything from everything. You're creating redundancy and resilience. One source fails, 2 others are still working. That's the definition of true backup. And here's what no one from the utility company wants you to understand. Once you have 3 or 4 weeks worth of steady performance data from your Earth batteries, you have proof. Not theory, not sales talk, actual numbers. You can show a neighbor, you can talk to your adult children about it, you can look at your utility bill next month and know that a portion of what you're saving is directly attributable to something you built yourself for less than the cost of a nice dinner out. That feeling of self-reliance doesn't have a price tag, but it's worth everything to people who remember building and fixing things with their own hands. The question at this point isn't whether earth batteries work. The question is whether you're going to let another month go by before you start. Because every month you wait costs you money. Every month you wait is another month the utility company is charging you peak rates for power they could be generating themselves from beneath your soil. You have the knowledge now. You have the cost breakdown. You know exactly what you need to buy and where to find it. The only thing standing between you and actual energy independence is the decision to begin, not someday, not when you save up more money, not when conditions are perfect. Now, this week, order the materials, study the process, pick a corner of your property where you know the soil stays reasonably moist, and plant your first cell, one cell. That's how every revolutionary technology starts, with someone deciding that waiting is more expensive than starting. Your fixed income doesn't have to mean fixed energy costs. It means you've learned through a lifetime of experience not to waste money on things that don't deliver real value. Utility bills that rise every year and power companies that want you dependent on their infrastructure, that's not value. That's a slowly tightening grip on your finances. But energy you generate yourself, from the ground beneath your home, for less than the cost of a tank of gas, that's real value. That's independence. That's control. Thank you for watching this deep dive into earth batteries. If you found this helpful and you're ready to take control of your energy independence, please subscribe to the channel and hit that notification bell so you never miss our next breakdown on low-cost, practical energy solutions. Like this video if you learned something new, and let me know in the comments. Are you considering building an earth battery array? What's holding you back? I read every comment, and your questions shape the videos we make next. Take care, and I'll see you in the next one.